Let's talk about folding sets in 3-bet pots. Peter, what do you think about folding sets?
I love sets.
So this game is 25, 50, 100, 200, and JY opens the button to 500 here. Airball's in the small blind, and he 3-bets to 3K. And we're gonna play this hand from Henry's perspective. He is in the big blind, he's next to act, and he looks down at pocket 10s here after button opens, Airball 3-bets the small blind. What are you thinking about here when you look down at pocket 10s?
Airball plays a ton of hands. This is a pretty wide configuration. So I think I would like to go for a 4-bet here a lot of the time. And pretty much with almost any hand I would want to play, I'd want to go for a 4-bet, I think. Especially because you do have some tough players behind. There are 2 more blinds left, I believe, who are Andy Stacks and Mariano. I think I would definitely just go for a 4-bet.
So can you talk about a little bit what would your cold 4-bet range look like? And just to clarify, a cold 4-bet is when player A opens, player B 3-bets, and now you are player C and you have not acted yet.
So it's going to be a linear range, meaning that it doesn't make sense to 4-bet something like ace-5 suited, but fold something like ace-jack suited, for example. You just want to use your best hands. Against Airball here, because he plays pretty loose, I would want to be a little bit wider than normal. A lot of my better suited broadways, maybe something like queen-jack suited plus, maybe ace-10 suited plus, king-jack, king-10 suited plus. I might even go as wide as something like 8s or 7s. For pocket pairs. Against most people, I would just cold 4-bet the 10s anyway. Against Airball, I'm sort of fist pumping, cold 4-betting the 10s here, I think.
Yeah, and the thing is that Airball's just known, he plays a lot of hands, right? He doesn't like to fold, especially pre-flop. And when you're against a guy who just is not really 3-betting and then folding, like, why not put in the 4-bet with 10s here? Because he's gonna call with worse. Like, do we really think Airball's ever folding a hand like pocket 8s here? Do we really think he's ever folding a hand like ace-4 suited here? And just cold calling when you have 2 kind of aggressive rakes behind you who are yet to act, probably not the best decision. I kind of like just putting in the cold 4 here, but nevertheless, Henry does call, and we are going to go heads up to a flop. The flop is 10 Jack 6. And Airball checks. What are your thoughts here after Airball 3-bets and then checks on this flop?
I would expect a decent amount of c-bets from Airball, and I would say I think the hands that are almost most likely to c-bet are his sort of bluff hands. Airball is the guy that, he likes to bluff, and he's not just going to give up if he has a bluff, even if it's not maybe the best flop for his hand.
I think if Airball did have a hand like 8-9 or Queen 9 suited or King 9, I think he'd just be betting at nearly 100% frequency.
Yeah.
And so I think when he checks here, he's essentially saying, I have showdown value. If he does have a give up, let's say he has a hand like pocket 8s, he's not putting any more money into the pot anyway, unless he specifically spikes a set. So those hands are kind of irrelevant. So I'm kind of looking at the spot like, what happens if I bet small? What happens if I bet big? What happens if I check? If I check, I don't think he's just going to start blasting off on turns and rivers with bluffs, because I think if he had a bluff, he'd just start betting now. If I bet big, well, maybe if I go too big, I fold out ace king, ace queen, which I want those hands to continue. We're just so far ahead. And if we bet small to medium, I think that might be the best option here, because ace king, ace queen never folds. Maybe a hand like 10x never folds. Obviously, if he does have an overpair, he's never folding that hand, but I think more of his range is just going to be ace king, ace queen, and I want to make sure that doesn't fold now. So I'd probably choose a small to medium size in Henry's shoes. And Henry checks back, which I don't love for a bunch of the reasons we talked about. I think maybe, I don't know, let's try to get inside Henry's head here. Maybe Henry's thinking, okay, Airball, if we just check back and give him a little rope, he's going to blast off. But I think like we need to hold those coherent pieces together, and like when Airball checks the flop, he just doesn't have many bluffs, because if he had a bluff, he would start it on the flop.
Yeah, I would also say like Airball is the type, most people, this is not even something to spend time thinking about, but Airball could maybe have something like a good draw sometime and want to go for a check raise, maybe like king queen or queen 9. I could see if Airball had those, so I don't want to deny Airball the chance to do that. It almost just seems like, Henry knows when he cold calls, it sort of looks like jacks or 10s, and then he gets this board and he's like, oh, this is the disaster board to get paid.
Which is another reason why just a cold 4-bet, right? Okay guys, just gonna ask you real quick, if you are not already, please hit that subscribe button. If you hit the subscribe button, you see Peter at a casino, you show him you're subscribed to the Hungry Horse Poker channel, he will delicately nibble on your ear. And who wouldn't want this guy to nibble on your ear? Hit the subscribe button right now. Okay, so we go to a turn, which is maybe the worst card in the deck in Henry's shoes here.
Yep.
It is the queen. It brings in the ace-king. And now into a pot of just under 7K, Airball bets 5K. So what are you thinking here from Henry's shoes?
You know, I would definitely not be loving it. I would have rather a different card came for sure. You know, any card above the jack is not amazing, but the queen is definitely the worst one because I think ace-king makes a lot of sense to check from Airball. And queens here makes total sense too, that we could be beat by. I do think Airball sometimes plays his value a little bit tricky versus his bluffs you would like to just put pressure on.
So in Henry's shoes here, don't love this turn. It's not our favorite turn in the world, but we're still feeling pretty good about a call. Yeah, okay, we're losing to ace-king here sometimes, but we can still boat up. And Airball could also just have a hand like ace-queen here.
As much as ace-king makes sense, yeah, like you said, kings, aces also make sense.
We still beat quite a bit of the value, right? So call just seems fine. Raising seems like a bit of a punt. Folding seems egregious. So Henry calls. The river is the innocuous 2 of spades. Pretty good river for us. We would prefer that the river was a 10 or a jack, but a 2 is okay, right?
Yeah.
And now Airball goes 25,000 American dollars into a pot of 17. What are you thinking in Henry's spot?
I do not love it for sure. You know, I think Airball is repping quite a good hand now, and you know, ace king makes a lot of sense. But you know, Airball is not your standard guy who's only going to have ace king, queens plus getting to the turn. I think he can have a lot of other stuff. I do think bluffs are a bit unlikely with the flop check, and then this turn kind of making a lot of the possible bluffs sort of good hands. You know, if Airball had something like ace queen and the turn came a 9, I think it's possible he could run a bluff like that. But on a turn like this, you know, when ace queen and ace king, a lot of hands just have something now.
Here's one of the frameworks I like to use, and it's what we call our bluff catching checklist at Hungry Horse Poker. And number 1, the first question I ask myself is, can I be beating worse value? And I think yes, the answer to that is yes. A hand like Queen Jack makes a whole lot of sense. A hand like Queen 10, while unlikely because we have 2 10s in our hand, also makes some sense here. Now, do we expect him to be betting kings or aces or ace queen for this sizing? Probably not. Probably not at a high frequency, but I do think there are some 2-pair hands here that make quite a bit of sense. So, are we beating value? Yes. Number 2 on the bluff catching checklist, did we give our opponent rope? Because opponents are much more likely to bluff when we check a street or we are the pre-flop caller. If we're the ones who go raise pre-flop, bet flop, bet turn, bet river, and now they check raise the river, very, very unlikely that they are bluffing. But I think in this specific scenario, we checked back the flop, we waved the white flag a little bit, and kind of gave him the runway to be able to bluff. We did give him rope. Number 3, is our opponent likely to be bluffing for this size in this line? And I think the answer to that is maybe. One of the things I would think about here is this bet a big bet for Airball? And I don't think it is. I think he's used to playing very big pots in games bigger than this, used to bluffing for big sizes. I think he is capable of running the big boy bluff for the size. So when we look at those 3 factors, he could be betting worse for value. We gave him rope. This size is not particularly concerning because Airball plays bigger. I think when we stack those 3 things on top of each other, we think, okay, yes, I do have a bluff catcher, but when you go yes, yes, yes to the bluff catching checklist, I lean very heavily towards call, even though I don't love the spot, just like you.
Definitely number 2, I think, is very important because all the times I think of that I've been shown the most crazy bluffs and ones that I didn't expect are in spots where I've given people rope. So I think you just have to be careful about making crazy folds when you've given people rope, I think. I'm not going to be surprised to see ace king at all, but I wouldn't be shocked to see either a worse value hand or some sort of weird bluff.
And even if he's like massively under bluffing here, which I think he probably is because he checked the flop, and I think he just bets most of his bluffs on the flop. If he could still be overvaluing hands or betting worse for value, there's still plenty of hands where we can just call and win here, right?
Exactly,
so Queen Jack, Queen 10, pocket 6s.
If Airball has ace king, you just got to pay Airball here, I think.
Yeah, I'm on board. All right, so let's watch what Henry does on this river.
Is Henry thinking about making an enormous laydown? Putting Airball on ace king? And he's going to let it go. Wow.